Ever wondered if Elvis sang in Japanese? Did the king of rock and roll conquer hearts beyond English-speaking countries? The answer might surprise you. Elvis Presley remains one of the most iconic musical figures of all time, with his influence reaching far beyond American shores. While most fans are familiar with hits like Jailhouse Rock, Love Me Tender, and Suspicious Minds, in their original English versions, the King's music took on fascinating new dimensions when translated into foreign languages. Sometimes Elvis himself recorded these versions, but more often, he inspired local artists to create adaptations that catered to their home audiences. Number 15. The German Wooden Heart, Muss I Denn? Did you know that one of Elvis's most successful international recordings wasn't originally in English at all? Wooden Heart, a song featured in Elvis's 1960 film G.I. Blues, incorporated verses sung in German. The song was based on a traditional German folk song called Muss I Denn, which dates back to the early 19th century. Elvis learned to sing the German lyrics phonetically, delivering them with surprising authenticity. The song became a massive hit in Germany, where audiences were thrilled to hear the American rock icon embracing their language and musical heritage. In the film, Elvis serenades a puppet show, singing lines like Muss I denn, zum Statele hinaus, which translates to must I then leave this little town. The German version resonated so deeply with local audiences that it outsold many of his English-only hits in the country. What's particularly fascinating is how this bilingual approach helped Elvis bridge cultural divides during the Cold War era. While stationed as a soldier in Germany from 1958 to 1960, Elvis became a cultural ambassador of sorts, and his willingness to incorporate German into his repertoire endeared him to locals. The song reached number 1 in the UK and became a staple in Elvis's international repertoire, demonstrating how language adaptation could expand a performer's global appeal. Number 14. The Italian, It's Now or Never. O Sole Mio. Ever heard Elvis belt out Italian phrases? While It's Now or Never is recognized as one of Elvis's biggest worldwide hits, many fans don't realize it's actually an adaptation of the classic Neapolitan song, O Sole Mio. After hearing Tony Martin's 1949 English adaptation titled There's No Tomorrow, Elvis was inspired to create his own version upon returning from military service in 1960. The original O Sole Mio, composed in 1898, is one of Italy's most treasured musical exports. When Elvis's team secured rights to create an English adaptation, songwriters Aaron Schroeder and Wally Gold crafted new lyrics while maintaining the distinctive Neapolitan melody. Though Elvis didn't sing in Italian for the official release, he was clearly channeling the passionate delivery style associated with Italian tenor traditions. The song demonstrates how Elvis could adapt foreign musical sensibilities into his own distinctive style. His local approach on It's Now or Never marked a significant departure from his earlier rock and roll material, imputing his remarkable versatility as a vocalist. The song became one of Elvis's best-selling singles worldwide, moving millions of copies and topping charts across the globe. Interestingly, in Italy itself, fans embraced both the original O Sole Mio and Elvis's reinterpretation, viewing his version as a respectful homage rather than a cultural appropriation. The song helped establish Elvis as a truly international artist, whose appeal transcended not just language barriers but deep-rooted cultural traditions as well. Number 13. The Hawaiian Kuai Po, Sweetheart. Did Elvis really sing in Hawaiian? While filming Blue Hawaii in 1961, Elvis recorded Ku Apai, a love song that incorporated authentic Hawaiian language elements. The title translates to "sweetheart" or "my beloved" in Hawaiian, and throughout the song, Elvis sprinkles in Hawaiian phrases with surprising dexterity. Elvis's connection to Hawaii ran deep. He performed numerous concerts there, filmed 3 movies on location, and even staged his famous Aloha from Hawaii satellite, broadcast in 1973, which was watched by over 1 billion people worldwide. His embrace of Hawaiian musical elements and language helped cement his popularity in the islands. Ku Uaipo features traditional Hawaiian instruments alongside Elvis's gentle vocals, creating a cultural fusion that respected local traditions while maintaining his distinctive sound. Hawaiian audiences appreciated Elvis's efforts to honor their language, even if his pronunciation wasn't always perfect. The song became especially popular among Hawaiian fans, who saw it as a sign of respect for their culture, rather than tourism-driven exploitation. What's particularly notable about Ku Uaipo is how it demonstrates Elvis's willingness to step outside his comfort zone and embrace different cultural expressions. Throughout his career, he showed remarkable openness to diverse musical influences, from gospel and blues to, in this case, traditional Hawaiian melodies and language. This cultural flexibility contributed significantly to his global appeal and enduring legacy. Number 12. The Spanish Guadalajara. Could Elvis handle Spanish lyrics? During the sessions for the film Fun in Acapulco in 1963, Elvis recorded a spirited version of Guadalajara, a traditional Mexican song that celebrates the capital city of Jalisco State. Though it wasn't featured prominently in the final film, the recording showcases Elvis's enthusiasm for Mexican musical traditions and his attempt to connect with Spanish-speaking audiences. Guadalajara was originally composed by Pepe Guizar in 1937 and had become something of an unofficial anthem for the city. Elvis's version maintains the mariachi-inspired arrangement with trumpets and traditional instrumentation, while he phonetically navigates the Spanish lyrics. His pronunciation reveals his non-native speaker status, but the energy and respect he brings to the performance overcame any linguistic shortcomings. The recording wasn't widely released during Elvis's lifetime, making it something of a collector's item for dedicated fans. When it eventually became available on expanded soundtrack releases and compilations, listeners were surprised to discover this hidden gem in Elvis's catalog. While not as polished as some of his English recordings, Guadalajara reveals an artist willing to venture beyond his cultural comfort zone. What's particularly interesting about Elvis's Spanish language efforts is how they contrasted with his public image at the time. While American rock and roll was often positioned as a cultural counterpoint to Latin music, in the 1950s and 60s, Elvis himself showed genuine appreciation for diverse musical traditions. This openness helped him maintain relevance in an increasingly global music marketplace. Number 11. The French Vive Las Vegas. Did Elvis ever sing in French? While Elvis himself didn't record an official French version of Vive Las Vegas, the song received numerous French-language covers that became surprisingly popular in France and Quebec. Among the most successful was a version by French rock star Johnny Hallyday, often referred to as the French Elvis. Halliday's adaptation maintained the energetic feel of the original, while adapting the lyrics to appeal to French audiences. Rather than a straight translation, The French version captured the spirit of the Las Vegas experience through a distinctly French cultural lens. The result was a fascinating cultural hybrid that helped expand the reach of Elvis's music into Francophone markets. The French connection to Elvis runs deeper than many realize. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, was particularly interested in developing Elvis's appeal in international markets, and France represented a significant opportunity. French music journalists were early appreciators of Elvis's revolutionary style, and his films performed exceptionally well at French box offices. What makes the French adaptations particularly interesting is how they reflect the cultural back and forth of the rock and roll era. While American rock was influencing European youth culture, these translated versions show how the music was being reinterpreted and filtered through local cultural sensibilities. The French versions weren't mere imitations, but creative reinterpretations that added new dimensions to Elvis's musical legacy. Number 10. The Japanese can't help falling in love. Is it true that Elvis has a cult following in Japan? While Elvis never recorded in Japanese himself, his music has been adapted into Japanese numerous times, with Can't Help Falling in Love, Eizazuni wa Eranai, becoming particularly beloved. Japanese artists have recorded countless versions of this Elvis classic, carefully translating the romantic lyrics while preserving the melody that made the original so enchanting. Elvis's popularity in Japan blossomed in the post-war era, when American cultural influences were reshaping Japanese society. Japanese fans were drawn to Elvis's charisma and distinctive voice, even when they couldn't understand the lyrics. This led to a phenomenon where local artists would record Japanese versions of his hits, helping to spread his music to audiences who might otherwise have been disconnected due to language barriers. What's fascinating about the Japanese adaptations is how they navigate cultural differences in expressions of love and romance. Japanese lyrical traditions often employ more subtle metaphorical language to express romantic feelings, compared to the relatively direct approach in American pop music. Translators had to find creative solutions to convey the emotional content of Elvis's love songs in ways that would resonate with Japanese listeners. The Japanese Elvis fan community remains vibrant today, with Elvis impersonation contests held regularly throughout the country. There's even an Elvis-themed restaurant in Tokyo called King Creole, named after one of his films where Japanese Elvis tribute artists perform regularly. These Japanese connections demonstrate how Elvis's appeal transcended not just language, but deeply different cultural contexts as well. Number 9. The Hebrew, Return to Sender. Would you believe Elvis's music made it to Israel? Return to Sender received a Hebrew adaptation titled Chazer el-Shwesh, Hatcher Lashalach, that became unexpectedly popular in Israel during the 1960s. While Elvis himself never recorded in Hebrew, local artists created versions that captured both the catchy melody and the story of unrequited love that made the original so appealing. The Hebrew adaptation required significant creativity from translators, as the song's premise involves postal terminology that doesn't always have direct equivalents across languages. Yet the core narrative, about a rejected lover whose letters keep coming back marked "Return to Sender," proved universal enough to connect with Israeli audiences despite the cultural and linguistic differences. Elvis's music arrived in Israel during a formative period in the young nation's cultural development. As Israeli society was establishing its own popular music traditions, international influences like Elvis helped shape local understandings of rock and roll. The Hebrew adaptations weren't just music. They represented cultural exchange during the Cold War era, when such connections carried additional significance. What makes the Hebrew versions particularly notable is how they integrated American rock and roll rhythms with Middle Eastern vocal inflections and sometimes even instrumentation. The result wasn't simply Elvis in another language, but a genuine cultural fusion that reflected Israel's position at the crossroads of Western and Middle Eastern influences. Number 8. The Punjabi jailhouse rock. Can you imagine jailhouse rock with taglab drums? While no official Punjabi version was recorded during Elvis's lifetime, jailhouse rock has been adapted into Punjabi by several artists in recent decades, becoming surprisingly popular at Indian weddings and celebrations. These versions typically maintain the recognizable melody while incorporating traditional Indian instruments and vocal techniques. The Punjabi adaptations demonstrate the remarkable flexibility of Elvis's music. When transplanted into an entirely different musical tradition, songs like Jailhouse Rock reveal unexpected dimensions. The driving rhythm that made the original so revolutionary in 1957 finds new expression when combined with the complex rhythmic patterns of Indian music. What's particularly interesting about these cross-cultural adaptations is how they navigate the original's lyrics. The American prison imagery that frames jailhouse rock doesn't necessarily resonate with Indian audiences in the same way. Translators often take creative liberties maintaining the rebellious spirit of the original, while replacing specific cultural references with ones that make more sense to Punjab listeners. These Punjabi versions exemplify how Elvis's music continues to evolve and find new audiences long after his death. Rather than remaining frozen in time, his songs serve as templates that can be reimagined across cultural contexts, ensuring his legacy extends far beyond English-speaking countries. The popularity of these adaptations among younger generations of South Asians shows how musical influence can skip generations and geographical boundaries in unexpected ways. Number 7. The Portuguese fever. Did Elvis fever spread to Brazil? While Fever was itself a cover, Elvis recorded his version of Peggy Lee's hit in 1960. It received numerous Portuguese adaptations titled Febre that became hits in Brazil and Portugal. These versions maintain the sultry, menaced feel of Elvis's recording while adapting the lyrics for Portuguese-speaking audiences. The Brazilian adaptations are particularly interesting because they often incorporate subtle elements of bossa nova, the distinctively Brazilian musical style that was emerging around the same time Elvis was at his peak. This creative fusion produced versions that honor Elvis's original while embedding it in a distinctly Brazilian musical context. Elvis's influence in Brazil ran deep, inspiring a generation of Brazilian rock musicians in the 1960s and 70s. While he never toured South America, his movies were enormously popular in Brazil, helping to spread his music to audiences who might not otherwise have been exposed to American rock and roll. The Portuguese adaptations served as cultural bridges, making his music more accessible to listeners who weren't comfortable with English. What makes the Portuguese versions particularly valuable from a cultural history perspective is how they document the global spread of American popular music during the Cold War era. These adaptations weren't simply about entertainment. They represented cultural exchange during a period of significant cultural tension when American cultural exports, like Elvis's music, carried implicit political dimensions alongside their artistic value. Number 6. The Swedish Crying in the Chapel. Have you heard Elvis's music in Swedish? Crying in the Chapel received a Swedish adaptation titled Grat intimer I kyrkan that became unexpectedly popular across Scandinavia. While Elvis didn't record this version himself, his gospel-influenced original inspired numerous Swedish artists to create their own interpretations that resonated with local audiences. The Swedish versions are particularly interesting because they navigate the song's religious content through a distinctly Lutheran cultural lens, rather than the Southern Baptist traditions that influenced Elvis. This subtle shift in religious context required translators to find Swedish expressions that could capture the spiritual essence of the original while making sense within Scandinavian religious traditions. What's fascinating about the Swedish adaptations is how they reveal the universal appeal of Elvis's more gospel-oriented material. While much attention is paid to his rock and roll innovations, Elvis's religious recordings found particular resonance in countries with strong Christian traditions, regardless of denominational differences. The Swedish versions demonstrate how his spiritual music could transcend not just language, but different expressions of Christian faith. Elvis's popularity in Sweden and across Scandinavia remains strong throughout his career and beyond. Swedish Elvis fan clubs rank among the most active in the world, and Elvis impersonation remains a popular form of entertainment at Swedish events. The continued enthusiasm for these Swedish adaptations highlights how thoroughly Elvis's music has been integrated into Scandinavian popular culture. Number 5. The Russian Blue Suede Shoes. Would you believe Elvis was popular behind the Iron Curtain? Despite Cold War tensions, Blue Suede Shoes received underground Russian adaptations titled Sini Zamshaya Tufli that circulated through unofficial channels in the Soviet Union. These versions represent a fascinating chapter in cultural exchange during a period when American music was officially discouraged by Soviet authorities. The Russian adaptations faced particular challenges beyond just translation. The concept of blue suede shoes itself, a luxury item and symbol of Western consumer culture, required contextualizing for Soviet audiences who had limited access to such products. Translators often got creative, finding Russian equivalents that could capture the symbolic significance of the shoes while making sense within Soviet material reality. What makes these Russian versions historically significant is how they document the underground spread of American rock and roll during the Cold War. Elvis's music reached the Soviet Union through various unofficial channels, smuggled records, radio broadcasts from neighboring countries, and handmade recordings on discarded X-ray films known as bones or ribs. These adaptations represent acts of cultural resistance during a time when embracing American music carried real risks. The popularity of these underground adaptations revealed the limits of official Soviet control over culture. Despite official disapproval, young Soviets found ways to access and reproduce Elvis's revolutionary sound, adapting it into their own language and context. These Russian versions stand as testaments to the power of music to transcend even the most fortified political boundaries of the 20th century. Number 4. The Arabic Are You Lonesome Tonight? Could Elvis's music resonate in the Middle East? Are You Lonesome Tonight received several Arabic adaptations, including one titled HLNT Wide Lel at Hal Anta Wahid Alayla that became surprisingly popular across several Arab countries in the 1960s and 70s. These versions typically retained the melancholy mood of Elvis's recording while adapting the lyrics to suit Arabic poetic traditions. The Arabic adaptations present fascinating examples of cultural translation. The spoken word section in Elvis's original, which references Shakespeare's As You Like It, posed particular challenges for translators. Some versions substituted references to Arabic literary traditions, while others attempted to maintain the theatrical metaphor but with cultural adjustments that would resonate with Middle Eastern audiences. What's particularly interesting about the Arabic versions is how they navigate the song's expressions of romantic longing. Arabic musical traditions have rich vocabularies for expressing love and loneliness that differ from American pop conventions. Translators often drew on classical Arabic poetic traditions to find equivalents for Elvis's expressions of romantic melancholy, sometimes resulting in versions that were actually more poetically complex than the English original. Elvis's music reached the Middle East during a period of significant cultural opening and exchange in the region. His films were particularly popular in countries like Lebanon and Egypt, which had vibrant film industries of their own. These Arabic adaptations represent not just linguistic translations, but helped integrate Elvis's music into Middle Eastern entertainment traditions. Number 3. The Mandarin, Love Me Tender. Did Elvis conquer China? While Elvis himself never recorded in Mandarin, Love Me Tender received several Chinese adaptations titled Wen Ru Dai Wo that have gained popularity in recent decades as China has opened to Western cultural influences. These versions maintain the gentle melody of Elvis's original while adapting the lyrics to suit Chinese linguistic patterns and cultural sensibilities. The Mandarin adaptations are particularly interesting because they emerged much later than many other foreign language versions. While Elvis was breaking records in America and Europe in the 1950s and 60s, China was largely closed to Western popular music during the Mao era. It wasn't until China's reform and opening period beginning in the late 1970s that Elvis's music could be widely heard there, and these Mandarin adaptations represent this delayed cultural exchange. What makes the Chinese versions noteworthy is how they navigate the song's expressions of romantic devotion. Chinese music has its own rich traditions for expressing love and commitment, often using nature metaphors and indirect language that differs from the relatively straightforward decorations in American love songs. Translators had to find Chinese expressions that could capture the emotional essence of Love Me Tender while feeling natural within Chinese linguistic and cultural contexts. The popularity of these Mandarin adaptations has grown in the age of digital media, with versions appearing on Chinese streaming platforms and social media. They represent how Elvis's musical legacy continues to find new audiences in previously untapped markets, with each cultural adaptation adding new dimensions to songs that English-speaking audiences might consider definitively established. Number 2. The Hindi, Suspicious Minds. Can Elvis's music thrive in Balai? Suspicious Minds received a Hindi adaptation that incorporated elements of traditional Indian music alongside the driving rhythm of Elvis's original. These versions, usually titled Sandigdan M, Sandigad Man, demonstrate how Elvis's later material found resonance in cultural contexts far removed from its Memphis origins. The Hindi adaptations are particularly fascinating because they often extend the original song's length to accommodate the more elaborate vocal ornamentation characteristic of Indian musical traditions. What might be a 3-minute pop song in Elvis's version could become a 5 or 6-minute exploration in its Hindi adaptation with vocal techniques that Elvis himself never employed. What makes the Hindi versions especially noteworthy is how they navigate the song's theme of jealousy and distrust. Different cultures have different conventions for expressing these emotions in music, and the Hindi adaptations often draw on Balasi traditions for depicting romantic conflict. The result is a version that maintains the emotional core of Suspicious Minds while expressing it through distinctly Indian musical and lyrical conventions. The popularity of these Hindi adaptations extends beyond India itself, finding audiences among the global Indian diaspora. They represent how Elvis's music continues to evolve through cultural reinterpretation, with each adaptation adding new dimensions to his musical legacy. These versions aren't merely translations, but creative reinterpretations that demonstrate the remarkable flexibility of Elvis's musical template. Number 1. The Tagalog Hound Dog. Ever heard Elvis in Filipino? Hound Dog received a Tagalog adaptation titled Asong Ulo that became a surprise hit in the Philippines during the 1960s. While Elvis never recorded in Tagalog himself, his music found enthusiastic reception in the Philippines, where American cultural influences were already strong due to the historical relationship between the two countries. The Tagalog versions present interesting examples of cultural adaptation. The original's somewhat confrontational lyrics about an underperforming hound dog required creative translation to maintain both the meaning and the rhythmic feel in Tagalog. Translators had to find Filipino expressions that could capture the dismissive tone of the original while still fitting the driving rhythm that made Hound Dog so revolutionary. What's particularly interesting about the Filipino adaptations is how they blend American rock and roll with Filipino musical sensibilities. Some versions incorporate subtle elements of Filipino folk traditions or local instrumental touches that give the adaptations a distinctive character beyond merely translating the lyrics. These creative choices help the song feel less like an imported novelty and more like something that belonged in the Filipino musical landscape. Elvis's popularity in the Philippines has remained remarkably strong over the decades. The country boasts some of the most dedicated Elvis fan clubs in Asia, and Elvis-themed establishments continue to draw crowds in Manila and other major cities. These Tagalog adaptations represent just one aspect of a deep cultural connection that has lasted far longer than anyone might have predicted when Hound Dog first reached Philippine shores. Did Elvis truly become the world's first global pop superstar? The evidence seems clear that his music transcended not just geographical boundaries, but linguistic and cultural ones as well. Through these 15 foreign language adaptations and many more not covered here, we can trace how a young man from Tupelo, Mississippi managed to connect with listeners across continents and cultures even when they couldn't understand a word he was singing. But what does this ongoing process of translation and adaptation tell us about the universal qualities in Elvis's music that continue to resonate across languages